Tom, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Not so, man. Good to meet you.
Congratulations on the film. It premieres in theaters this Friday, Shepherd, which I thoroughly enjoyed just because I enjoy films that kind of make you think a little bit more instead of just handing it to you all on a platter. And I think that Russell Owens had a great vision into putting that together. So what I really want to start off with is being that you play Eric Black. Tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, man. So Eric is when we meet him, there's a degree of there's a lack of clarity as to what's happened in his life in the time before we meet him. But there's definitely been some kind of trauma, and it appears to be to do with his relationship, although that remains slightly ambiguous at the start of the film. But Eric's from a family where the history of the family is that everyone was a shepherd. And so to try and kind of shake himself out of the state of mind he's in and the melee he finds himself in, he takes this job as a shepherd on an uninhabited island off the coast of mainland UK. Goes with his dog, kind of thinking it might cleanse him. And actually the island becomes almost a manifestation of his inner turmoil. Mm-hmm. And he goes on this kind of, to call it a journey is probably not the right word, but he kind of struggles more and more to make sense of what's happening within him and make sense therefore of the symbolic nature of what's happening around him on the island. And he and I think the audience start to question if any of this is real or not, and if the island even exists or not, and if Eric even exists at times, and we're trying to piece that together with him, who's trying to piece back together the fragments of his life that his psyche for sure feels as if it's kind of disintegrating before us.
So that's one of the interesting things, and I feel like it's challenging as an actor. You can tell me one way or another, but being able to pick up for you with a character that has gone through this trauma, that has gone through some of these things in life that have now put him in this mindset. How do you approach a character like that? What kind of background reading or what kind of meetings do you have maybe with Russell as far as to getting into the head on who Eric is so that they could put you in that same mindset?
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, I only had 3 weeks, so I didn't have a lot of time. So it's something that actually you could spend 3 years, and it wouldn't be an unreasonable amount of research because there's a necessity, I think, as an actor to try and make, the parts of take the genre elements away from the film. Actually, the social realism at the heart of the film in terms of what Eric's going through. I think you have a responsibility as an actor to make that as honest and as depict that as sensitively as you can, and try and make it as tangibly real as you can. So any amount of research isn't enough, is the truth. But having 3 weeks, obviously there were certain points, there were certain touch stones that I would go and speak to of people in my world that I thought might be able to help me shine a light on how to make that feel viscerally real, particularly as my main method of communication with the audience was going to be physical, with the shortness of dialogue. And then it was about, once I kind of had a rough framework, I guess it's about trying to not cheat that, whatever that vibration of his body would be, trying to not bring me to it, trying to immerse myself as much as I could in that and try and stay in that without obviously needing to be called Eric and not Tom. People could call me Tom, but there was an element of trying. So I took myself, when we got on the island, I went off to a different hotel that no one else was in and tried to maintain a degree of isolation the whole time. And just basically try and put my body through what his body was going through and as much as I could, and stay within that and take myself off into nature when we were filming and try and very much be in that world and hope and cheat as little as I could, and just hope that would go some way to bridging the divide of me not being in the place that Eric is at, but needing that to feel real, because that's the heart of the film, and that's the thing that I think is particularly when I read it, the most gripping about it, because we don't always necessarily see the complexities of the psyche, and particularly someone's being in the place in their life that Eric is in. We don't always see that depicted, I don't think, necessarily as sensitively as I felt Russell had depicted that. So I really wanted to keep that there.
And then you mentioned something real interesting that I was going to bring up. You talked about how a lot of your communication with the audience was going to be physical. What kind of training do you have for that? What kind of things maybe do you focus on to make sure that with, maybe the bat of an eye, or even just the way you're holding on your shoulders, either high or low, to make sure that the message is transported to us?
Yeah, not enough, I would say, and actually, it was hard for me to watch the film back, because I'm not the go-to guy for recommendations for horror movies. Like, I'm certainly not the person who's seen them all. So I was learning a new genre from the inside out, and also playing a character that, however much I would feel like I'm immersed in him, I then have to trust that the audience is going to reach out to me through a genre that I don't fully know the rules of at that point. And so watching the film back, there's so much that I would change if I could do it again. But then I think everyone I'm sure most people feel like that when they watch a performance. But I didn't really know. I didn't really know if people would connect with it. I still don't really know if they do. I hope they do. But it wasn't a case of, I don't work in a way that is prescribed. I don't kind of say, right, this is where I'll raise my eyebrow, or this is where I'll breathe deeply, or this is where I'll turn and look, or whatever it may be. For me, acting is rhythmical, and everything has to happen as instinctively as possible. And so I just tried to stay in that rhythm and hope that was enough, and hope that people would be able to feel it rather than see it. And I hope they do. I don't know. It's hard for me to judge that.
I mean, everyone is really their biggest critic, obviously. So what kind of communication during these scenes did you and Russell have to make sure that you guys were on the same page, or at least you felt that you were on his page?
Yeah, well, that's the big one, man, because it's very much Russell's story. He wrote it. I think it's very different. Eric is not Russell, and Russell is not Eric. But I think there are elements of Russell in Eric, although Eric is very, very different for a lot of it. It's Russell's story, man, and it was very important to me that I would endlessly go back to that and build from him, actually, in many ways, as well as the script and everything else I've talked about. But we had almost like a tripod of a support network of me and Russell and Richard Stoddard, the DOP, because I think actually there is only one director on a set, there is only one DOP, and there was only one actor. And so we were all kind of on our own trying to cross over to make this, and that support from those two was massive. It very much felt like a collaborative effort between the three of us. And I was very fortunate. My first ever job, Richard Stoddy, we call him, and Richard Stoddard was he was the camera operator on my first ever job. So I'd kind of learned how to act in front of the camera, working with his rhythm. So there was something we had a shorthand from the get-go, and therefore the three of us, we didn't have the biggest crew. We're on an island in the middle of February. There's rain deep down. We've got long days. Actually, that support network was imperative. We wouldn't have got through the film without it, I don't think.
Wow, that's quite a lot. It was only you mentioned you haven't worked on too much horror. What was one of your biggest things that you learned in working on this film?
In terms of the horror genre?
Yes.
I think actually it's really interesting, because I when I watched the film back, and I remember saying this to Russell, and Russell disagreed, because I think what Russell's done very cleverly, and I can see that, is you have this social realism at the heart of it, and then there's these kind of horror tropes that I think go against that, and actually I think that works for the film. So you have, like, I don't want to give anything away for people who haven't seen it, but you definitely have the shock factor of certain imagery and certain editing and all of that stuff. But for me, actually, it was and I guess because I was perhaps immersed in my desire to tell this story subtly, but it's the levels you can go to. Actually, I guess it's like music, man. You can't if you go against the grain in pop music too much, it falls apart. If the Beatles suddenly had something crazy in one of their songs, it falls apart. you got to kind of live in the delicacy of the world you create. Whereas actually, I guess it's a bit more like, I guess, like hard rock, man. You can chuck anything in there. You can go as big as you want, and it can take it. And in hindsight, I would have I definitely learned that you can have more of a spectrum performance in it, and horror can take it. I definitely didn't know that before I stepped into this movie.
Thanks for sharing that with me, Tom. Thank you so much for your time. Also, I
No
appreciate
worries,
it. And it
Good
was
to meet you.
I enjoyed seeing your performance in Shepherd, and I hope that this weekend other people will too. And yeah,
Thanks,
great
man.
to meet you as well. Take
Yeah,
care.
real pleasure. Have a nice day.
Likewise.